Rain has brought some much needed relief after the devastating bushfires, but the impact of this crisis will be felt for some time to come. Peter Wilkinson, many people are still without homes and power. Let's talk about community engagement and how these poor people can expedite the process of rebuilding their lives. Social media might be a good place to start.
Yep, and the governments have done a terrific job because the money's flowing. Social media, Facebook particularly, can become really handy here. If people Google I live in, there are a lot of rural communities that have, I live in Collyambly, I live in this town, I live in that town. And a real option for people connecting is to say, I live in Bateman's Bay, or I live in Maxville, or I live in Malakuta, and develop a Facebook hub that way. The Facebook on its own isn't a huge amount of value, but another thing that communities can do, and this is about allowing information to flow upwards. The information is flowing downwards through the bureaucracy, slowly, as you just said, but this is about allowing information to flow upward. The other thing that is a possibility, and this is used a lot in the commercial sector within companies that are doing community engagement, is to appoint a community liaison officer. And the community liaison officer will typically be paid by a company, or in this case perhaps the government, but will actually, funnily enough, not represent the company or the government, they'll represent the community. And so if you've got a community liaison officer and a Facebook site that becomes a watering hole for people, and it's got suitable house rules so that when people complain, they don't say, the bastards won't give us a chainsaw, we need a chainsaw, everybody's a wimp. You wouldn't allow that kind of language, but you might allow language that would say, can anyone help us beg, borrow or buy a chainsaw because we really need one? And given the wonderful generosity of Australians through this, you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody who posted that on I live in Maxville on that Facebook site would get a chainsaw quick smart. And it would allow the government and anybody else to see what's happening in the community. So those are two options that help community engagement in this kind of situation. There are many more, of course.
Social media, it's so powerful, and one of the greatest examples of that has been Celeste Barber, the comedian, raising over 50 million. It's the best way social media has been used in this country ever. I think it's been tremendous. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the mainstream media, and that can also be very powerful, as we know.
And as everybody who's been living in rural or regional Australia knows, the ABC has been absolutely amazing. There's been some terrific coverage just in distributing information. But the other value of media is to keep a watchdog on the crooks and where the money is not flowing. So the media flagged what's not happening in the northern part of New South Wales. The media has been flagging the con men. So the media is very important. The other thing that can be really valuable with community engagement is a community liaison committee. So that's similar to Facebook, except it's a group of people who live in the community. Now, the difficulty with a community liaison committee is that if you get the wrong people on it, the group dynamics are wrong and you'll get a lot of argument. But a community liaison committee with a group that's already set up might work really well. So if there's a local Lions or a Rotary or even a CWA or something like that, some kind of group of people that already exists that does community work, and all those three are just three groups that do community work. So that would mean that you might have, as an option for a community, drawing on the experience of companies, a community liaison officer, a functioning Facebook page with suitable rules, a community liaison committee that's not dysfunctional, that's able to make quick decisions and quick recommendations, and of course the media. So those are four things that can be really valuable in a situation like this. The other thing I'd say is that government organisations are terrific, but they tend to be fairly rigid and process driven. And people will have already heard about filling out monstrous forms and delays and that kind of stuff. That's just a function of the bureaucracy, and we need a bureaucracy that's slow and methodical and careful and tends to be focused on bean counting and limiting money wastage and those kinds of things. In this situation, what you need is an opposite set of values. You need nimbleness, you need creativity, you need to be able to get things and you need good feedback back and forth. So you need different attributes to what's normally provided by a public service.
Yeah, the people are sick of politicians swanning into towns for photo ops. They want the money and they want it now and they want to rebuild. We had a question from one of our LinkedIn viewers about how Scott Morrison rebuilds his reputation. It makes it very, very tough when he's lurching from one crisis to the next. And this issue with Bridget McKenzie has not helped at all.
Yeah, the sports fraud. So in our last quick take, we talked about reputation can be built over a lifetime but damaged overnight. And particularly with politicians and some controversial organisations like banks, they literally go from crisis to crisis. And so unless you're skillful, you don't get a chance to put jelly beans back in the jar. You've got no credit points to draw down on. And we said that the difficulty that the Morrison government will face is that there'll be a crisis next month and the month after and so on. Little did we know it was going to happen a few days later with the Bridget McKenzie instance. And the difficulty with the government has faced on that is not expediting that quickly. And my guess is the decision that Mr. Morrison and his colleagues have to make is managing his internal issues within the government versus the trust he wants to earn back from the community. So he's got two separate groups of stakeholders, if you like, which makes it very difficult.
So over the last few months, we've had bushfires, floods, dust storms, and then on Monday, a hailstorm hit Parliament House. The government is just copping an absolute beating at the moment. We'll see you next week.